Awesome. Would like to thank you for allowing me at your homes for this ninth episode of Season 3 of Esoteric Science Roundtable. I would like to start by reminding folks that this upcoming episode of Therefore I Am, Jeff Contreras' show, which is going to be this upcoming Tuesday, December 30th, 10 p.m., Channel 16. I will be the guest on the show, and we will be discussing some different aspects of Jesus, man, myth, what have you, and kind of try to flesh out, if you will, that subject a bit, and kind of compare notes somewhat, and try to have a useful, productive conversation along those lines, and to kind of try to tie together somewhat the different points that we've been making on our respective shows in relation to this important topic, considering that this is December and this is the month that Christians traditionally revere and celebrate. And in all honesty, I did not expect to have a live show today. I found out about 5 o'clock that I was going to have a live show today, so you have to excuse us a little bit for that. But nonetheless, and if we weren't able to make people aware of that, I apologize as well. Today I would like to go ahead and further discuss the aspect of Christ in relation to the man Jesus, and in particular the impulse, the Christ impulse, and the concept of the overshadowing that took place for 3 years' work in Palestine, where, in essence, the second aspect of the Trinity united with physical man, Jesus, for, again, a particular work that needed to be carried out that was cyclic and right and proper for that particular time and that age. Excuse me. And if we keep in mind that throughout history we can look at examples of seasons, cycles, different ages that manifest and unfold, and the impulse that conditions or governs that particular unfolding at any time. And history is rich with that unfolding, and we can do quite a bit of research along those lines if we just care to look back and study and note what particular trends, what different inventions, what different social reform, dictatorships, things along those lines, again, scientific inventions, religious changings, winds prevailing, things like that that would, again, cyclically change and filter through from age to age. And this, again, is a right and proper impulse that we find manifesting itself on our planet. And this divine evolutionary process is constantly working itself out and refining itself. And we, as humans, are part and parcel of that unfolding. And we, as the self-conscious mediating kingdom on the planet, are responsible, again, since we have the ability to think rationally and not just go by our instincts, but we have the higher intuition that we can tap into as well. So we have a direct link to our divine aspects, that we find ourselves as custodians or mediators between the lower kingdoms, the animal, plant, and mineral, and then linking those kingdoms with the higher kingdoms, which are based on humanity, but have evolved to more higher refined states or conditions of existence. And we still, again, have links to those. The immediate link that we are striving for as humans is the so-called kingdom of heaven, or the fifth kingdom in nature. And that is comprised of those individuals that have passed through many, many lives, many incarnations, and they've found their way through, on their own individual process, their own journey back to divinity, their own way that they made their path back to our shared source, that they unfolded these different impulses throughout themselves within their work, and that this unfolding process, we can look back and see historical significance, examples, implications, and we can see how this process of unfolding has carried itself out, again, throughout humanity, demonstrating that this unfolding takes place through humanity as it's needed from time to time. And so we can see this, again, this process of returning back to divinity, and those examples of those individuals that have perfected the human condition, relatively speaking, and those individuals no longer need to put on a physical vessel. Well, they have their own physical vessel, generated, but they no longer need to come into through birth and reincarnation and karma, and those restraints no longer apply to them because they have lost all desire for the physical plane life, save to stay behind to serve humanity. Their outlook, their understanding is one of pure reason. And so when the emotional nature is perfected and our heart is open and allowing to a sufficient degree, then we demonstrate this unfolding, and this process or these steps start to unfold themselves and become real and apparent in our lives. And this unfolding of the heart nature ties directly to the kingdom of heaven, so-called, and Christ and the church invisible, who are they embody this condition, essentially. And so, again, keeping in mind the heart aspect tying intimately to Christ and the church invisible, because they correlate to the love aspect. And so the heart aspect, as far as their understanding of it, or what motivates them along those lines, is what is called, again, pure reason. They don't pick favorites. They don't say, oh, this one is better, I like this girl better, I like this puppy better, this is my favorite kind of candy, whatever, things like that. These trivialized things that basically are of the lower material nature no longer hold sway over these individuals. And so this cold, clear light of love is the light, or is the type of love that conditions and embodies their endeavors, as opposed to the warm, energetic, moving out type of love that we experience and we express primarily in our human condition here on the physical plane. And that is the love we feel for our family, the love we feel for our significant others, the love we feel for our pets, our car perhaps, our favorite football team, all of these things that we have a desire for, and that bring us some sort of emotional satisfaction. But again, it's a separative kind of picking of favorites, as opposed to an all-inclusive, pure reason concept of love, which is very difficult, in all honesty, to grasp unless one has made some steps along those lines to try to find that path of return. Otherwise, this will sound like a foreign concept completely, and won't really have any real applicable, practical use for individuals, unless they have made some understanding along those lines. Now, if we consider again why it is that the Christian impulse took or held sway and became the predominating world religion that it has in so many ways, that it has consumed the West. If we could, in particular, if we want to say world religion that has consumed the West, would be probably a little bit more appropriate. But nonetheless, why is it that this Christian impulse became the predominant impulse? In spite of, rather, perhaps some other impulse gaining ground. And one thing we can certainly look to as something that helped really entrench Christianity as an accepted and something that was going to stick around for a while was the events that took place when the Roman Emperor Constantine, sometime after 300 AD, when he took power, he became a convert to Christianity, and so he sought to instill upon the Roman Empire and the people that were the subjects of that empire a particular brand of Christianity along the lines of what he envisioned. And so he went through a lot of trouble, quite frankly, to endeavor to do several things. He sought to preserve the supposed and alleged burial spot of Jesus, and went through great lengths to recover the tomb that allegedly Jesus died and raised from. And another thing that took place during that time was the Nicean Creed, Nicean Council rather, in which certain aspects of the Bible became canonized, and this Bible, this collection of writings, became canonized or accepted and authenticated by the official church. And so once the Bible was canonized, it was fixed into a rigid set of writings that were the accepted and authorized writings. And so previous writings that existed far, hundreds of years back, and there's a lot of questions as to who wrote them and the certain circumstances that were surrounding the writings of these particular Gospels, or different writings that are known as apocryphal writings that didn't make the final cut, if you will, but nonetheless have significance to that day and age. And then also some of the so-called Hellenized text, when we find that the Hebrew folks came under the Greek influence and they became Hellenized, so-called, and so under that influence they spoke primarily Greek and wrote primarily Greek, and so translations had to be put into effect in order to change this Hebrew writing into a Greek writing so that it can be made useful for those, again, Hellenized so-called Greeks, the more modern Greeks that were evolving and coming into some notoriety at that time. And there are many well-known writings that are so-called Christian writings that come from that time, and many of them came from Egypt in particular, that again we refer to as Hellenized, but they're not so widely regarded or accepted by the official church. But nonetheless, they do have relevance because they were supposedly from that time, and they speak of events that supposedly took place during that time, and they further add either more confusion or some clarity, hopefully, on the filling out the fuller picture and giving us a more comprehensive view into what truly did take place during that time, because there's still much contention, much debate, and the real story is yet to really be demonstrated. And that is certainly one of the mysteries of Christianity, in that it remains undefinable to a certain degree, and it remains elusive simply because the text has been interpreted many different times, it's been edited, and it also is symbolic and figurative, and so, it's a literal rather, and symbolic, and so we have to look at it as what the dead letter text shows us is just the black and white words on the page and what that interpretation would give us, and then looking deeper into the symbolic aspects of those words and going back into understanding of comparative religion and how that ties into previous religious dispensations, and how symbolism recurs through the ages, and how it is reemphasized and revitalized from time to time, and an impulse is carried through that religious dispensation that is right and proper for that particular culture at that time, and we see that continuing over and over again. Now, considering again our approach to the so-called fifth kingdom, or the kingdom of heaven, and how we make our progress or our steps forward, we make an approach, or we make that part of ourselves, and we ourselves become part of that kingdom. There's a real merging in that sense, that it's not just some imaginary sort of envisioning that takes place. There's a real physical merging that takes place, and real practical merging of action and effort that can go forward from this kind of a relationship, once one understands more so about what the work of the kingdom so-called is, and how one can join in with that work once we have some fuller understanding of how it plays itself out, and how we can, again, follow this impulse. It ties back to energy and force, and how certain people are going to gravitate towards certain energies more so than others, and certain persons are going to put themselves in a position through the evolutionary process and through karma and through many lives, they're going to put themselves in a position to where they can start to make those steps to approach the kingdom, so-called. And as those steps are made, it becomes more of a cognizant, understanding sort of process, in which one is aware of what one is trying to accomplish, and things manifest themselves in one's life to further facilitate that flowering forth. And that ties back to the ask of the Bible. And when we ask in a proper fashion, and we ask with an open heart, and we ask in a sincere fashion, that is when these sorts of things start to become real and manifest and verifiable in our own lives. And again, we can start to approach the kingdom a little bit closer and start to get a better idea of what those inhabitants are doing, what that work is, and how we can link ourselves to that work. in a very real way. And so, again, keeping in mind that throughout time there was a tradition called the mystery tradition, or an initiation process, in which there were tests or trials that individuals, candidates for the initiations, were subjected to. And this took place periodically as certain elect individuals proved themselves worthy and fit for this mystery tradition and for being entrusted with certain secrets that were only given to certain persons in private and not made public to everyone. Although there were the different means by which, through myth, drama, and things of that nature, the Greek tragedies later, we find that the outer persons are given something that they can get the ABCs through. Although they aren't participating in the inner aspects, they get the outer aspects, and that satisfies their level of understanding for that time. And so we see this process going forward through time until roughly around the 300 AD mark, when Constantine comes into power. And then the mystery traditions and the different branches of that embody that ideology have to go underground quite quickly, and they have to things along the lines of writings and things of that nature really have to be kind of tucked away, because they are considered heretical and they're considered against the accepted canon of the church. And so those individuals that had a slightly different interpretation of Christianity than the accepted state version that Constantine was trying to impart to the people were running into a bit of trouble. And so they really had to move away from the crowds of people, and the writings that they did, they had to, again, really guard over quite carefully in order to preserve the writings in the manner in which they intended, and also to save their own skins, really, so that they could, take the time to preserve this tradition adequately enough so that before they did meet some sort of demise, they could leave something behind that could be found again, and that could be, the torch could be picked up at a later date. And so we find that that is exactly what did take place. But this covenant, once Christianity became more, again, a global preoccupation with individuals, and it took on the vast magnitude that it did, we can see again that this Hebrew tradition, based on a blood covenant, finds its way closer and closer into a situation in which we get somewhat more of our current interpretation of Christianity that's come into being through the current churches, and that they have propped themselves up as the mediators or the intermediaries between us and God. And so it is assumed by some that we need these individuals to show us the way back to our shared source, back to our common divinity. The Gnostics, which is one of the sects around the time of Christ, so-called, and also the Nazarenes, the Essenes, the Therapeutae. The Essenes in particular, the group that, according to esoteric tradition, Jesus was born into. We find these folks stashing away their writings during this time because of fear of persecution, and also wanting to preserve these records for future generations that could find them and make use of them when a more proper age was unfolding, which again refers to our age now and what's happening now and what we have an opportunity to take advantage of in our time. But again, this Gnostic tradition going underground, and some of the writings, the Dead Sea Scrolls attributed to the Essenes, the Nag Hammadi scrolls attributed to perhaps the Nazarenes, but these were found in Egypt. And again, they tie back to this Gnostic aspect. And the Gnostic aspect didn't really emphasize a blood atonement or a vicarious atonement so much, that we had to worship a man because he died for us and gave up his life for us, and his father put him through this so that he could be sacrificed and make us clean. That wasn't the interpretation that these individuals had. They had more of an interpretation that we make ourselves like Christ. And St. Paul was quite Gnostic in a lot of his interpretations, although he tried to meld that Gnosticism with the Hebrew blood tradition from the previous ages. And so he was often misunderstood and fell into some scrutiny because of his attempt to do this, and his interpretations, because they did meet with some confusion and they weren't quite clear, because again this refers to a more mystical union in which one becomes Christ, so-called. One, as St. Paul says, finds Christ in you, the hope of glory. And that is a very deep and profound saying once one really understands the implications of it, in that we are compelled through the examples of the Gnostics and their writings to literally follow the examples of the so-called initiation process that was demonstrated for us so adequately in the gospel narratives with Jesus through Christ, again enacting 3 years' work in Palestine, and that this exemplifies for us this particular approach, and again how it continually unfolds, and it moves closer into our understanding, and it truly permeates our being. And that is, there's a scientific, if you will, if you want to consider it in those terms, aspect for that. And that is that when you consider our physical body, we have the dense physical, which we see and we're very well aware of, and then we have the energy body, which is like a pattern or a mold upon which this physical dense body rests. And it's like a framework, if you will, of like energy or light, whatever term you choose to use, and that is the etheric body, so-called. Then above that, there's the emotional or astral body, so-called, and then the mental body, and that is dual as well in its nature. But nonetheless, if you want to just break it down to threefold, considering physical, etheric, astral, emotional, or the dual mental aspect of our physical nature, that as we again make this return to divinity, to our shared source, that we make this common group approach as humanity, we can do so without intermediaries and without the mystery tradition, because the new impulse that we received and that we've been steadily taking in more so and more so, and it's been accumulating and amassing and amalgamating itself more so in the dense physical nature and approaching nearer and nearer to our humanity. That is the Christ impulse that's moving closer to us, and that this second aspect of the Trinity has permeated into our etheric nature. And so that aspect of this initiation science is what gives us the opportunity that we haven't had before, and that this continues to progress through time, and that this is what is referred to as Christ consciousness, so-called, and this is what will allow us to move forward and to follow the man bearing the pitcher of water into the next house, as is clearly indicated in the gospel narratives, and for us to understand the implications of that Aquarian dispensation and unfolding, and how we can follow that example, and how, again, this is another reference to the aspect of the Christ consciousness, or this energy, being relevant and valid and useful and current for now, for the past, for now, and for in the future. And considering that we still have ages of unfoldment left in which this Christ consciousness, so-called, can further unfold. And if we consider in the book Revelation, there's a certain segment that describes 7 seals being opened, and the first 4 seals relate to different horses, and those signify ages in the past that we've already gone through. These are human ages that we've already evolved and refined and progressed through, and the horse symbolizes in many esoteric sense, in a vast different number of ways actually, our human nature and our evolutionary process. And so once we see the horse symbolism being relegated to the past, and then we find the 5th seal referring to humans collectively, and that in essence refers to our day and age now, and that we have this unfolding through humans, through groups, and through our shared humanity, that we have this opportunity to further understand and further have a greater awareness, and to be impelled and compelled more so by this Christ consciousness, Christ energy, as we move nearer to it and as we understand more of what it entails for us, and we can really permeate more so into these mysteries. And again, as we consider this Aquarian dispensation moving closer, and these unfolding of these seals, these ages that are represented by the seals and what they represent for us, then we get to the sixth seal. And there's an earlier reference to a community at Philadelphia that's mentioned in Revelation. And so the sixth seal, again, will tie in or bring us to this sixth community, this unfolding aspect. And if we keep in mind that Philadelphia means brotherly love, this is the age that we will look forward to in the very near future. And we see definite indicators of that coming into play right now when we understand and consider more so that group thinking, group consciousness, and a more synthetic approach to all areas of human endeavor are becoming more commonplace and more prevalent in our day and age, and that concept, that amalgamating of energies and efforts, will continue to bring itself more so into the future. It'll have real meaning for us, and it'll have definite applications for us once we understand, again, the concepts of the symbolism and the opportunity for the community at Philadelphia, or the community based upon brotherly love. And when we consider that there are certain key components that have to be engendered or really brought into ourselves before that can take place, if we consider the concepts of goodwill, right human relations, just these basic concepts that are going to allow us to share and exchange and cooperate more so, and that's going to bring this further unfolding of this symbolism that we see described as the city of Philadelphia. And so as that brings itself nearer and nearer to us, and again, this energy, if you will, is amalgamating and moving closer and closer with our humanity. And this is something that we really have to, that we can really take advantage of if we choose to consider it. Now, going back to the initiation process as narrated in the Gospels, the fourth aspect of that playing out is called the Crucifixion, or in the East, the Great Renunciation. And in that particular instance, that is the instance of the death of the physical body of Jesus, overshadowed by Christ, again, the second aspect of the Trinity. But keeping in mind that Christ, as the second aspect of the Trinity, also is an evolving individual, and that Christ is considered the teacher alike of angels and men, and the eldest brother in the race of men. And that so Christ, even though we can refer to Christ as the second aspect of the Trinity, still nonetheless has ties to our humanity and is part and parcel of our humanity, and is a shining example of what we can fulfill and we can accomplish if we so choose to make that supreme effort and that supreme sacrifice. So keeping in mind that this merging of consciousness took place during that time, and this initiatory process, this test or this trial took place, in which Jesus the man, giving up the physical body through this process, this energy, this effort, this initiation was coinciding with an initiation that Christ also was taking. And so we see two tremendous exchanges of energy taking place simultaneously. And this is a type of energy that was the synergy, or the sealing that took place, was what gradually allowed this Christ permeating of energy to slowly make its way closer and closer and closer to our earth plane, and allow this impulse to take place. If we really consider carefully, since from 2,000 years ago, or maybe a few hundred years after the advent of Christ, all of the efforts and endeavors that played out, again, along group lines, and that we see throughout history, in that short amount of time, there's more amalgamation and more community, more, again, cooperation, sharing, exchanging among nations than we've seen probably at any time in the history of our globe. And so that there was a short amount of time that this cooperation began to unfold, and we see today, if we really look around, and we don't have to look very hard, at how things have become globalized and how through trade agreements and all these other things that may really not be in the best interest of all individuals, nonetheless are being implemented by those that are following some impulse of their own, and they see fit and they feel the need and they feel the urge to bring forth into manifestation their own vision of some globalization concepts and how they want to merge those together and bring those into physical manifestation. So we have to be cautious as to, who's steering the ship at any given time and what the will of the individuals are at any given time, because we have to consider things in group terms, in terms of our shared humanity, if we're really going to make progress along these lines. It's really, again, going to be a group effort, and the so-called Aquarian Age is symbolized by synthesis, cooperation, and coming together. Just the idea of water flowing, that concept of flowing, energy flowing together, that amalgamation, that ties in considerably with the symbolism and shows and demonstrates for us what we have available in the near future. And so, again, this impulse is still relevant, and it's refers to an upcoming day and age that we have to look forward to, that's really on us now, and it's just going to be coming pretty much at breakneck pace as this unfolding permeates the hearts and minds of men, and just through mass communication and just the amount of goodwill that's right now being demonstrated throughout the globe. It's showing that it's sufficient and adequate to really get the ball rolling in a real momentous way, if we can just really look at it in that optimistic fashion and try to divert our attention from all the negative things that we keep being fed and keep being tossed at us through the media and things like that. If we can just realize that those dog and pony shows sidetrack things that we constantly are being tossed at us and that we're being fed constantly are really a distraction from these more important concepts of coming together in a real sense of group understanding, and also the revival or the revivification, the refocusing on certain aspects of these early Christian communities that seem to have been coming out right around the same time, right around the 40s. Again, the Dead Sea Scrolls, Nag Hammadi, and some of these other writings that have come out right around 1945, right around the birth of the newest rendition of Israel that we have on the globe. And this is no mistake that all these things coincide, and that we can see that this unfolding of this early tradition is being found now, because this is the time, the day, and the age in which it can be applied for our further unfolding and our flowering forth. And we can understand now, even in this high-tech age, so-called, that we live in, we can get back to these more simple approaches to life. And so many people are trying to get back to more of a holistic approach to their diets and many aspects. And people are just trying to strip away the non-essentials and get back to the basics and get back to square one and get back to some real livingness and to get back to the kernel, the real impulse behind the outer manifestation. And we see that unfolding more and more. And so that's right and proper that this would unfold now during this time, so that we've had about 50 years, roughly speaking, to let this information filter back into the public. And so through people like Edmund Bordeaux-Secoli and individuals like that have found these writings, he reintroduced us to the Gospel of Peace, the Essene Gospel of Peace, and it really goes into detail about having a very disciplined lifestyle, strict diet, strict vegetarian diet, raw foods diet, cleanliness, and again, strict discipline, and just getting back to the basics. And it's a very simple approach, and it again reemphasizes the relationship of man to God without the need for any intermediary, without the need to throw some coins in a cup once a week, or show up and see who's wearing what or who's driving what kind of a new car once a week, and say that, oh, I've paid my penance for the week and I can go back to being whatever, whoever, however. And so we get back to this real livingness, this focus on what is really important. And again, I really feel like this is part of a so-called Christ consciousness that is going to be a precursor to any real unfolding of a corporeal or an in-the-flesh version of Christ, in which that energy, the second aspect of the Trinity, would embody the proper vehicle to find its way to actively work among the sons of men. And this can happen. The potential for this is quite real, that many people that are living right now could potentially see that event take place. It has to again do with how much goodwill, cooperation, exchange, sharing, right human relations, and the will to good that is demonstrated among nations, among individuals, municipalities, counties, cities, on down the line, groups, congregations, learning institutions, all the sharing that we have an opportunity to take advantage of that's right there available for us. It really depends on how many people want to, grab that torch and run with this impulse and light other torches along the line so that this does become a global consuming fire. And if we remember the biblical phrase, our God is a consuming fire, it ties back to that magnetic electric energy that is part and parcel of how the heart works, how the sun vivifies the solar system, and those analogies come into play again, that we can fire up more individuals through our own firing, through our own igniting, and we can demonstrate much, much more than was done 2,000 years ago, and that is spoken to us in plain terms, that we'll do that and greater things. All those and greater things that will be available to us. And it's just a matter of understanding that the potential is certainly there, the potential is now, and that we have that capacity within ourselves. It may be somewhat latent. Some people demonstrate it more readily than others, but we all have the same opportunity. And that, again, is what Christ has shown and demonstrated by coming nearer and nearer throughout the ages until finally in Palestine 2,000 years ago, that consummation took place for that instilling of that energy for us to make use of in this day and age, and how it has its relevance still into the future, and we'll still be able to understand much more fully the so-called mysteries of the kingdom of heaven. And that is my sincere wish and hope for all individuals. But let me go ahead and grab a couple of calls and see what's going on. Hello, caller, are you on the air?
Hello?
Hey, how's it going?
Hello?
Hey, caller, you're there. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Can I speak to the guy that's on TV?
That's me. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. I'm very impressed with the words you said. Are you there?
Yes, I'm still listening. Go ahead.
Yes, and I know you're a man who loves God very, very much by the words you said and everything. But really, sir, I just want to present something to you that might be very, very interesting.
Go ahead. Sure.
Basically, what the deal is, I think that the angels of God are the ones that God wished, and we are the ones that God allowed. Adam being the catalyst, he is the being that God desired, and we are the ones that God allowed, and then we became approved, and then we became the ones that, he accepted. But if you really look at things, God would not create a being like us and say, these are the creatures that I wish to really be in my own universe. He would not create something. Would God create something more and then something less? No way.
Well, you're making some interesting points. I'm going to let you go on that note, but I would say that our dense physical vehicles do demonstrate a pattern that that God has used to create. 2 legs, 2 arms, the head, atop the whole works and all that. But that there is inside of us the true nature that we can't see, the true temple of what we really are, the true living aspect of us is something that God did create in a more perfect condition, and perfect being a somewhat relative term because evolution continues and evolution continues and evolution continues, and what we may, as our human perception, consider as perfect may not be perfect to an aspect of awareness that's a little bit higher evolved than ourselves. And I'm not speaking about aliens necessarily, I'm just talking about the whole hierarchical unfolding through humanity that takes place, and how The pattern is there, and that pattern is a perfect pattern. And so I think that the creation process allows for things, even though they may seem non-perfect, and we are non-perfect in this physical realm, to find some state of perfection. That is part of the process, for us to find some relative state of equilibrium or some relative state of perfection. And that's the goal, and that is achieved through love. Selfless love and selfless service to humanity. Hello, caller, you on the air?
Hey, Corey.
How's it going?
Hey, how you doing? It's
Good.
FBU.
Hey, what's up?
How you doing tonight, man?
All right.
Hey, if you'll allow me to, I've got a few comments to make. If you'll allow me, I know
Sure.
you kind of get a little trigger happy on the drop button sometimes. If you'll just let me finish, I won't mention anything of my usual
fine.
topic.
Go ahead.
Anyways, man, am I allowed to mention other channels on Access?
I suppose just don't commercialize.
Okay.
Yeah. You say you saw something on the channel or something?
Yeah, yesterday, man, it was
Sure.
beautiful. I watched from about noon all the way to about 11 at night on the History Channel, and it was all about the Bible. And did you happen to catch any of those?
I did watch them, as a matter of fact, and I normally don't watch stuff like that, but I've been trying to kind of get the more mainstream interpretation so I could be a little bit more up to speed for when Jeff and I do our little
Oh, yeah,
throwdown.
'cause, man, I mean, just so much compelling evidence and just...
Well,
I mean,
they seem to take it
after
for
watching
granted.
a lot of shows like that, man, I have no doubt that, I mean, there's just absolutely no doubt that Jesus did exist. And I know, I mean, just from what I saw, it was amazing, the shows that they presented yesterday, and you should actually catch more of those if you get a chance. But another point I wanted to make is, you know, around Christmas time and the holidays, you know, there's a lot of people that, you know, you might have a homeless guy or maybe a person in the hospital, you know, that has a serious illness, and maybe just people that without any family or, you know, not a lot of money at all. And, you know, these people sometimes, you know, all they have to hold on to is their beliefs and their hope in God. And I was wondering if you would agree with me that I kind of find it sort of offensive for someone to come along and try to crush that hope, the only hope that someone has. And I'm talking about Jeff Contreras doing the shows and trying to disprove the existence of Jesus. And I just kind of find that offensive, you know, when these times, you know, you have, you know, the suicide rate is up, and, you know, that might be the only hope that people have to hold on to. And I just don't see the purpose of someone trying to come and crush the last bit of hope that somebody might have and try to disprove the existence of Jesus. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't really think that's his intent. And Jeff considers himself a Christian, which may seem really ironic to you, and other people too that I've come into contact recently that I would think perhaps would believe in a Jesus in the flesh, don't necessarily, but still, again, consider themselves Christians or have some sort of an idea of a Christ consciousness, if you will. And I think that's part of the equation. But as far as Jeff trying to dash people's faith, I really don't think that's his real, sincere intent. I don't think he gets any pleasure, sick or otherwise, out of trying to kind of twist people's
Maybe
beliefs.
That's not his intent. That's just from what I'm reading when I'm watching
well,
the shows.
right. I see where you're coming from. And also, he really, my take on it is, if nothing else, that should strengthen your faith. That should allow you to go into that quiet place and really ask, you know, is this true? Ask yourself, you know, is this what this long-haired guy on TV, myself or Jeff, either one, is talking about? You know, is this true? What do you feel? And then you have to fall back on you have to do your own homework. And that's what we're trying to compel people to do, is do your own homework. I try to get people to consider the living aspect of Jesus the man and Jesus as Christ.
Right. Well, what I'm trying to ask is I just don't see any benefit, any positive benefit of that kind of activity, trying to disprove the existence.
Well, again, it forces you to do your homework. It compels you to go and think and ponder and contemplate what you might have been exposed to if you happen to see his show. And if it's making you question or making you waffling a little bit, then go into that quiet place, as I was saying, and then ask those questions. And that's when, you know, if there is anything real to what I've been discussing for this past 2+ years, or, you know, the revelations and testimony throughout the ages of saints and sages and all these great individuals, you know, that there has to be some reason for that. I mean, we're not wasting our time, in other words. There's a definite impulse behind that, and it's a human impulse. It's not, like I was saying in previous shows, the mystery tradition is not for mushrooms, it's not for myths. The systems were set up in the past for humans to go through and improve themselves. Jeff does not deny the mystery tradition, far from it. He doesn't deny the process of initiation. You know, he acknowledges those things. He just doesn't acknowledge that there was a man Jesus, and so it almost, I don't know, I mean, he would probably argue that we're not past that veil yet, so we don't see that it was just a myth. And I would argue conversely that maybe he hasn't made it through a particular veil to see it in the terms of a human being in relation to a divine principle and the merging of those two, and how that affects us, and how that inspires us, and how it compels us, you know, through what's going on right now. It's still relevant.
Right. Yeah, I see where you're coming from.
It's different. I mean, you can point back to all the solar saviors, but it truly is different for several reasons, because the merging never took place in quite this fashion. The merging was never quite this close, and what was accomplished as far as an exchange of energy, you know, didn't take place previously. And that impulse, the fact that it still is carried on today, I mean, you could say the printing press came into being and Christianity was hip and happened at the time, so people just said, hey, let's write down this Christian stuff. It seems to be pretty snazzy and jazzy. That's not the case, because the printing press has been into effect for a long time. Why didn't we revert back to Zoroastrianism on a world scale? You know what I mean? There's reasons why the Christian impulse took seed and root and
has existed ever since.
Right. I mean, it's a powerful impulse, and there's a definite reason for that. If it was just some little fly-by-night myth, and it didn't have any real meaning to it or any meat behind it, then, you know, it would just be a little cute little story. But there is a real living impulse, and that's why I have to encourage people to find in their own way what that impulse means, and how does it stir you, you know, that little stirring sensation in your chest when that gets up and running, and you start to feel some sense of joy or some sense of commune with nature or other individuals or whatever, you know, those ideas of love that start to come into effect, you know, those are what lead us in that direction. And that's, if you're seeing some show and it's, you know, discouraging you, you have to go to that place and you have to ask, you know, otherwise you're not doing your homework. And I don't believe you can just say, I believe that Jesus died for my sins and the blood of Jesus, you know, cleanses me and I'm good. You know, I believe. That doesn't get it in my book.
Well, yeah, you got a point there. I just, you know where I'm coming from.
I believe I do, yes.
Okay, thanks,
all right,
man.
Thanks, have a good evening. Take care. Hello, caller, you on the air?
Hello, Corey. Hey, what's up?
How's it going?
This is the other member of the FBU.
All right, how's it going?
Pretty good. That's my fellow mate right there.
Mm-hmm.
I've been hearing how he was talking.
Right.
But I have a comment.
Go ahead.
Do you know that there's still racism in Austin and in Bastrop, like clans and stuff, like the KKK and stuff like that?
Right. Let me say something about that real quick. Those groups are still going to be around, so we can look at them and see those spooks in their white sheets, and it's just a joke. It's really just a joke. It's what you call anachronistic. It's something that's out of time. And these things that are out of time, that are no longer appropriate for our day and age, are going to be looked at like relics in the museum. These things are going to get put on the shelf, and we're going to pass them by, and we'll look at the spooky, you know, KKK do-rag stuff on the museum wall one day, and we'll all laugh, or we'll all be just embarrassed at our, you know, stupidity. So these things have to exist to remind us, you know, that we still have some work to do, basically. That's the bottom line. Hello, caller, you're on the air. Hello, caller? Okay. Hello, caller, you're on the air. Hello, go ahead.
Hello.
Okay. All right. Let me try one more. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Hello, Corey.
Yeah?
It's me from the FBU.
Okay, go ahead.
I just want to tell you that, have you heard of the Austin Music Network?
Yeah, what about it?
I'm taking over that one. I hope you know that one. They know me already.
Why, you call the live shows down there?
Yeah, well, like, yeah, I call in and, like, they're familiar with the FBU.
Okay.
Because of me.
All right.
The Matt from the FBU wishes you and everybody a late Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And party on till 2004 FBU. FBU rules.
All right, man. Have a good one. Yeah, I hope you guys are having a pleasant holiday and everybody's staying safe and, you know, not getting too out of hand, because there's still there's still more work to be done, quite frankly. We got things we can do down here, spreading the word about whatever we want to spread the word about, whatever our particular little pet projects are that we get into, we want to get on our soapbox about. There's still time to get that message out, to talk to people and bring out your point of view. So again, stay safe and enjoy yourselves, but kind of keep it under some reins a little bit if you can. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Yeah, Corey.
Yes.
I've known my Bible for like 50 years. Okay, and Jesus has been my closest friend since I was a child. I grew up in an abusive home, and he was all I had to cling to. And I know that he said, if I go not away, he told the apostles, if I go not away, the Holy Spirit cannot come to you. And I know that because he's not here in person now and in heaven, the Holy Spirit, though, is here because there is a devil. I really know that there is a Satan. I have spoken to both of them. And Jesus has healed me of several diseases, or his Holy Spirit has. And Satan has come to me at night and tried to undo the healing. I know of both of these entities, and I know they're real. And I know that I just wanted to remind you that Jesus said, if I go not away in my person, I have to die. Because if I go not away, the Holy Spirit cannot come to you. And the Holy Spirit is the one that dwells with us to help us compete with the devil. And because Satan, I believe Satan is the one who makes all of these shows come on right around Christmas time. Just like that first FBU caller said. Right around Christmas time, everyone comes on trying to disprove Jesus or disprove the theories and all of the things about the Bible. But he was real, and his spirit lives, and because there is a Satan, and he did say that in the Bible. And I just wanted to bring up that point.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your
God
words.
bless you.
Okay, you as well. Thank you. Have a nice evening. I would agree. I say the term's Christ consciousness, but the term Holy Spirit is equally as adequate, and I would say interchangeable with what I'm using as well. That hovering close to humanity, that aspect, that energy that came through that event is what we do have the opportunity to bring through us, and that is what lifts us and nurtures us in many ways. And I think that it's hard to prove things to people as far as evidence of healings and things like that. And if we have some sort of communication or what have you, usually it's what you call subjective, or it's falls back on an individual. It's not something that everybody can share and pick apart and be aware of. And so nonetheless, I do encourage people to try to make that relationship, to try to find in their own lives some meaning and to try to find the livingness. We do find a lot of information coming around this time of year, one way or the other, that tries to perhaps put some negative light or to put a different coloring on these things to kind of maybe distract us. And that's kind of my thinking on it as well. There are a lot of distractions during this time, the material distractions being first and foremost, that prevent us from really, again, looking at some living aspects, some spirit that we can have really be a part of us. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Hey.
Hello?
Hello.
How's it going?
How's it going?
All right. Hello, caller, you're on the air. Okay. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Hello, Court. This is from the FBU again.
Okay, what's up?
Hey, how's it going?
All right.
Yeah, I just want to give a shout out once again to the Awesome Music Network.
Okay.
Keep your show alive, man. Keep your show alive.
Take care, man. Thanks again for your patronage. Have a nice evening. Let's see here. Let me go ahead and wrap up a little bit and consider some of what I'm going to be talking about here. Again, this impulse, this energy, whatever you want to call it, that comes closer to us, that some people can grasp and understand and gain from, and other people just think is just some silly, flights of fancy that these people are just out of their heads, and they've all, they're under a shared delusion. They've all found some delusion or some way to find satisfaction through this great myth and this great story. But stories are one thing, but something that has, again, a living impulse that is has vitality is a bit different. And that's, again, how we find that this impulse has carried itself through all this time. It still challenges us now in this day and age, and we're still talking about it and still wondering, what does it all mean? What are the implications that, are out there for us? And, how can we understand this? How can we make this a real usable system? How can we get past perhaps the confusions and the different aspects that seem to not correspond, that seem to not agree? Seem to be some places in the Bible that contradict, one of the words looking for, that contradict other areas, and that's when we have to look to the inner meaning. We have to look to the living aspect of those words, and then we can start to really understand why those words are the way they are, what this symbolism has, what is the relevance of this symbolism, and why has it been used in this book, and why has it been passed on from time to time. Again, there is a livingness that is clothed or veiled in a myth or a story or a symbol, so that it makes it easy for the people to understand, and it can be passed along because we like to be entertained, so we want to hear a story or we want to hear a myth, and that's how we find these things being passed along. But still, inside, again, there's that livingness, there's that impulse that finds its way into somewhere in our brain, and we start thinking about it a little bit, and it starts kind of gnawing at us a little bit, and then we start thinking more about it, and then after a while, something may change our thinking entirely, and that's when we have a reorientation or a refocusing of our entire way of thinking. And this happens to people in their lives, and this is very much akin to the term initiation, that process brings that greater unfolding, that greater awareness. Something happens, that gnawing process, that leads to something that just clicks, and there's a new way of looking at things that just evolves. And most of the time it's very quick and sudden, that all of a sudden we're reeling from, what hit us, and we don't even know what hit us, but things just seem different, and so we're having to look at things a little bit differently. And that may be if one understands some of the mysteries of Christ and takes those into themselves as a real living, nurturing, embodied, again, a living thing, something that can maintain itself and grow and evolve through us. And that's, again, the beauty of Christianity, that it continues to grow and evolve through us as humans and through the race in general. And that's why we see so many varying cultures adopting Christianity, regardless of their ethnicity or where they're from, what country they're from. We find a tremendous amount of interest in that impulse. And people want to learn, they want to know, and they want to have the so-called personal relationship with Jesus, and that has been talked about so much. That has been passed through the Hebrew blood covenant, and that's been ingrained and embodied in this tradition that's found its way into what we call Christianity, and the various ways that it's been interpreted, again, into this day and age, and likely will still continue to be argued upon for some time to come yet. But we can still find ways to come together and agree upon some basics, and that's what Jeff and I are going to try to do on Therefore I Am. That's going to be this upcoming Tuesday, 10 o'clock on Channel 16. Yeah, Channel 16. And don't forget to check out the Chris Athanas Reality Expander Thursdays on Channel 16 at 10 p.m. And I'd like to thank my producer, Chris, for commanding the helm of the Starship Esoterica. I'd like to keep people, please keep in mind the reason for the season and the livingness of Christ. And thanks, Austin. Have a nice evening.